What's up? This is Justin from Art the Hard Way. We're going to look at abstract expressionism. We're going to do a messy painting using some of the tools here. We got palette knives, we got brushes, toothbrush, a shoestring, some diluted paint, a couple of different size canvases. I'm going to go ahead and start with this larger of the two. And a lot of times when I start a painting like this, I want to do an underpainting. So we're going to use a little bit of yellow using our foam brush. We're just going to cover the surface. There's really no rhyme or reason to the rhythm of this. I just like to be aggressive, if that makes sense. And compositionally, I just want to make some marks that have a little personality. I'm not overthinking the process by any means, and I don't want to cover all of the white, the gesso, but I want to leave a mark. So after you're satisfied with what we would call like a underpainting, a few more strokes here, looks pretty good. Then I like to take the smaller foam brush, or really any size, and dilute a color that complements what I just laid down. And then just kind of trust in the process. Trust that I can kind of splatter a few drip marks on here and not overthink it. It's a lot of fun. Again, I'm not really thinking about where I'm going. I'm just trusting in the tool, trusting in my hand. A lot of abstract expressionism is just trusting your head and your heart to connect in the right place. And I got an institutional toothbrush. If you didn't get one of our kits, any good old toothbrush will work. And what you want to do is you want to dilute it. You want to dip it in the water and get it pretty wet. And then pick a color of your choosing. Everybody got at least one color in the kits. I'm just kind of giving you a combination of all of them. And then I like to use my index finger or my middle finger and just kind of aggressively kind of place my hand over the brush and just splatter. That's really what you want to do. And again, trusting your hand with the mark and just kind of covering the surface. And you can almost formulate a little bit of an airbrush technique if you have enough paint on your brush. And the closer you get to the surface, the more it's going to look like that. It's going to look almost like an aerosol effect. Make sure you have some rags. It's going to be messy. You can take a butter knife or a palette knife in this case, and again, just kind of grab a color, something you think will look good with what you're working on, and just make some marks. A lot of the abstract stuff is just don't think, just do, right? Trust your hands. There's no such thing as a mistake in an abstract painting. You're just making marks, moving. There's a rhythm to it. A lot of times when I personally paint in my studio, I like to do this on a really large canvas. So my whole body gets involved in the process. And that's what Jackson Pollock did, is he would paint on the floor. He'd paint these massive mural-sized paintings, and his whole body would get involved. So we're going to use a brush here and kind of do the same thing. We're going to get it wet and attempt to do like kind of like a bird's eye view drop. And you're allowing randomness to kind of fall into this process, spontaneity, if you will. So if you get it wet enough and you make some marks that are able to drip, you can kind of put your canvas upright and let those drips go as long as you want. I don't have a ton of water on them, so they're not going to run too far here. But again, while it's wet, you can do things you can't do when it dries, so you do have to kind of be in the moment. Take a yarn, piece of string. In my case, I got a shoestring here, and you can dip that in some diluted water as well. If you got a couple cups of water going, obviously the more water that's mixed with the paint, the more transparent it's going to lay down, but also the wetter the actual paint will become. And we're using all acrylic here. It's all water-based. And just kind of let your hand get heavy, and let it kind of smack that canvas, if you will, almost like dead weight. And you can really get some spontaneous movements if you do that. Those are a lot of fun. Everybody's got an old shoestring or a piece of yarn or something. So as you can see, this stuff's starting to drip quite a bit. I'm going to use a little bit of the oil pastels now. Oil pastels, I just like using them because I'm a mixed media artist, but just a couple gestures here and there just add to the composition. You can use your fingers, so the deeper you kind of rub into the surface, the more of a effect you're going to get. This is kind of more of that outsider art, This is kind of breaking the rules, just kind of throwing down whatever looks good. So I'm going to let that dry for a minute. I'm going to drop this smaller canvas, and this was white. I just laid down yellow before we started. In fact, the same yellow I started with on the larger one. So you can do that as well. It's an underpainting, kind of adds a brighter color to it. You can take a oil stick or an oil pastel and just kind of lay down a complementary color. That's one way to start a painting like this. Again, just not really thinking about it, just laying it down. And then kind of looking at all the techniques that we've got. So let's do a palette knife again. I think that looks like a lot of fun. Green complements yellow, secondary, so it's kind of a cool way to lay down your first gestural marks, if you will. And the more abstract painting you do, the more confident and comfortable you'll become. Again, using stuff like toothbrushes is just fun. Anybody can do it. I'm just going to take some more black and just kind of try to get my hands dirty. I'm not happy unless my hands are covered in paint. That means I've had a good day in the studio, I guess. But you can kind of see that airbrush come out a little bit better on this one because I had more paint on the actual toothbrush. I like to use my fingers, quite honestly. I use fingers more than I use brushes half the time. So if you feel comfortable, it's a great way to kind of get your hands loose. And especially if you're just doing layering like I'm doing, just let your hand move. Trust your head and your heart, like a jazz musician. You can dilute it as well with any common spray bottle. I'm just using an old alcohol bottle here that I've rinsed out. Got a little bit of red paint in there, but I'm going to get it with black and basically hit the black I just splattered, and it created a huge surface of paint that I can now move around any way I want to. So that may look a little dramatic. I'm going to use my palette knife in just a second here and just move it around a little bit. But let's get a little bit more of the splatter on top of it. It's very freeing when you have wet paint. That it can be kind of scary when you cover a piece with this much of a splatter, but have fun, move it around, see what you can do. Because it's so wet, you can remove it, you can move it around. So you can kind of reveal some of that yellow or your underpainting. Make it kind of messy if you want. Control the chaos, right? That's what these abstract artists were doing. They were doing non-objective work, right? There's no identifiable objects in this piece. There's no faces, no things, no places, no objects. Abstract expressionism came predominantly after World War II, and a lot of people were very unhappy with the state of the world, and so they wanted to kind of start over, and that's what these artists did. Predominantly on the East Coast in New York, and guys like Jackson Pollock were instrumental in putting New York on the map, if you will. Prior to this movement, they were 30 years behind Europe, so it was exciting to see how much notoriety they got as a result of the things they were working on. So again, here's two examples of different sizes, different methods. This one's still relatively wet. We can make it even more wet. See the gesturing? And just let that stuff fall a little bit. I'll let that dry a little bit. And that's about it. You can just have some fun with some of the stuff that we gave you in the kits. If you didn't get a kit, use your household items, butter knives, any kind of brush will work, shoestrings, water-based paint. Thank you so much for joining us today.